Hello, this is Josh Bear, as you probably know, and I'm speaking to anybody who wants to watch this, but especially my students at SAW. And I've been getting some requests for people over time, but especially recently, inquiring what kind of sketchbooks that I use and what I recommend. And I thought that this would be a good opportunity to get all close and personal and show people the sketchbooks that I prefer and talk about their particular options. And I'm going to try not to be too long with this. So let's get right into it. Okay, great. So first off, I do recommend that you go into a store and just grab whatever you've never tried before. This is a sketchbook that I seem to have abandoned pretty quickly, but I think at one point I was taking it with me to the Met. And this is a Canford. I grabbed it at random. I like the size. Then we've got one of my favorites, Croquis. I think that this is also pretty old. This one is from, I don't know, 10 years ago. And I think that I have gone on to other sketchbooks since then. And I think possibly Croquis does not make this brand anymore. It doesn't matter. Whatever they have, I'm sure is really good. Croquis, I have some other brands by them, like some other brands that you'll see a little bit later that it's from them as well. This one is Holbein. I'll come to that. So the thing to talk about with paper is that surprisingly, a lot of these papers stand up to multimedia. They stand up to watercolor. My trick for watercolor is that I try to use it like a glaze. So this is really thin, light paper. It has a lot in common with notebook paper, and it's holding up, right? You can see that it might wrinkle in a couple places, but not distressingly so, I don't think. And this would be something that still prints really well. It would be frameable. It wouldn't look too ugly. And you can always just kind of paint behind something anyways, and then you're having a lot of the real estate of the image that's not going to be wrinkly. So a lot of these thin papers, Croquis is very thin, are more durable than we might first think. You can see here, I was able to do pretty heavy ink on this. I did a full comic in here that was printed in an anthology. And then I was able to use thick multimedia brushes on this as well. This is probably a demo that I did recently for a class. And again, you can go back to your work over time, especially if you're using waterproof tools. You can kind of go in and work on it at another point, like so. Let's try another color here for this rock. A lot of times in my classes, I try to show everybody what we can do. I try to get everybody to explore what we can do with just black and white. And it's a weird thing that a lot of my students are into as well. I always feel like you're safe if you can do stuff in black and white, because then even if you can't afford to print it very well, like with color, it will still be reproducible. You can also do digital colors under something that's black and white. Whereas once you color it, you don't have as many options for doing digital. The black art line work can be, finessed and shaped, and the contrast can be adjusted. You have less options with watercolor, and still all the same, it is weird that we start from a black and white template. But I teach comics, and my values were forged in the 20th century. And in the early days, comics it's a big, heavy black and white medium, and that had something to do with the way that the work was going to be reproduced. Anyways, continuing on, as I mentioned, no particular order. We've got Holbein. Now we're moving on to a bigger sketchbook or B paper. Aquabee, excuse me. It's not Holbein. Holbein, Croquis, Aquabee. They're brands that are around. You see them in the stores, but if you've never grabbed one of them, maybe it's time to start, right? Maybe it is something that you could explore if you haven't in the past. Because these aren't cheap. These aren't really more expensive than the brands that are more vanilla, more maybe you see more often, more generic. And we tend to start there, and its paper is so cheap, relatively speaking, that why not explore what you can do with various ones. So I have many sketchbooks. Some of them will be left unfinished for years. Sometimes I work at the back and then move towards the front. Sometimes I, leaving the middle empty. Sometimes I flip them upside down. Sometimes I do serious work in a non-serious sketchbook. And this is sturdy enough paper that I could do a comic in it. But I often will end up, because I work so long on a page, and the more you kind of handle it, the more it gets kind of grimy and worn. You can use a heavier paper, a nicer, more durable paper for your finished work. So this is a book that I'm working on. I think this whole thing is filled up with mostly finished pages. And this is what is it? It's watercolor paper. I think the label might be torn out, but I'll find another one if not. And it's Strathmore. Strathmore's a really common name. You'll see it all the time. But have you ever bought the sketchbook version of their watercolor option? Maybe not. You can also see here that the paper, it's not. This is a $30 sketchbook. It's like about $1 a sheet, but I'm going to spend 8 hours on one of these pages. It's not $1 is not that much for that amount of time. And it'll take me months to finish up the sketchbook regardless, to the point that even this one still has 1, 2, 3 pages in the back, but I abandoned it, 4 pages in the back that I haven't even played with yet. So that is Cold Press Watercolor. It comes in a hardbound book. But my main go-to right now is Blick, I believe. I'm doing my current book in Blick spiral bound watercolor paper. Watercolor has the durability of Bristol, but it's got this tooth that I kind of like. It's a little bit rough, and I tend to like extremes. I almost tried to do that thing where I expanded the page. I try to do that thing where I like to go to one extreme or the other. I try to do it again. We're gonna have to come up with a word for that in the modern era when you accidentally try to expand paper surfaces if it's digital. Anyways, it's rough and it kind of slows me down a little bit. I don't know if you've had this experience with Bristol where you use it and it's just really deflating. There's something about Bristol at least when you start, it's not really that fun. It just doesn't really have a life to it. Whereas sometimes you get a cheap pad, like a Moleskine, and your pen kind of slides around and it's exciting. Or you get a paper that's like this. This is a Pentalic nature sketchbook. I don't know if you can tell, but you can see from the rough texture maybe of this pencil, it has a tooth to it, a little bit of texture. This is one that I haven't finished. I haven't touched this up for a little while. And once again, you can see that it takes watercolor really beautifully, maybe slightly differently than the thin paper that I was using before. It's just something about it. It's sinking into the paper, and I'm capable of leaving a very hard edged line Whereas with the other one, it bleeds into the paper. And then I can still take this and push the watercolor around, getting rid of that edge if I wanted, especially if I'm that hard edge if I wanted, especially if I'm really diligent and I keep on spreading it out, like I'm vacuuming a stubborn portion of the rug, and I'm just trying to spread it and blend, 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 blend. So different papers are going to take watercolor differently. Even cheap papers can take watercolor differently. The only thing you got to watch for, and you usually know this when it happens, is this thing where you use your paper and it just sucks up the watercolor and you can't blend it. Instead, when you try to, it just leaves a mark on the page. And what will happen is like you get something like photocopying paper, which isn't necessarily poor quality. And when it's new, it's at a certain stage of its aging, it will be something you can watercolor on, and then at another point it gets old and all of a sudden it's just sucking up your paint. Like I always say, it reminds me of a desert soaking up rain when it's arid. It just sucks it up. It just sucks it right into the below the surface before you have a chance to blend it. So if you're not confident with watercolor, by the way, always a safe bet. Just go behind the thing that you're doing. Go behind it and you can't go wrong. But once you want to explore more, you can start to, do different tricks with it. Right now, I'm kind of using the white of the paper to kind of contrast the shadow, which is a really different method. If I leave little gaps here, I can get the bones on the back of the hand even. Or I could go to where the dog has a shadow and maybe have the color peeking out from beyond it a little bit. So both things kind of strengthen each other. The black, solid, unyielding shadow and the more soft shadow. So I could go on and on here, but this is supposed to be a sketchbook demo, not a watercolor demo. But this is Pentalic, very big. This is probably 15 by 11. That's a perfect size. Standard magazine style comic book size is about 10 by 5. So let's see. Take a book. You take this book here, David Heatley, and you were to take a ruler and go straight up, I think you'll find that it should fit into this block roughly going right to the corner. There might be an inch at the top. This is slightly different format. See, it's skinnier, and that's the way comics tend to be. This one might be more like an 11 by 17 format. I'm not sure. Yeah. This one, I think if you go right to the edge, go up. No, I don't know. I'm going to edit this part out. Anyways, I tend to do my original pages roughly 10 by 15, which I think comes to like 9.5 by 14.5, somewhere in that vicinity. And I get a slightly magazine like format rather than the really skinny one. Okay, so we talked about the various sketchbooks. We talked about Holbein. We've got this one, which is what is this one? Oh, it's Holbein as well. If you look carefully, right there, Holbein, right? So beautiful sketchbook, thin, it's portable. The other one was heavier. This one is really light. And oh wow, I guess I did some lettering with this. That's a page from Raw Power. That must have been this page. This page I just kind of wasted, right? I could have done that on any paper. So it's possible to do finished work in here, and it's possible to do just toss off work. And is there anything I skipped? Let's see. Here's another Holbein. Oh yeah. Okay, this will be the last one of the last ones. This is Croquis. So as I mentioned, Croquis or Croquis, they change it up all the time. Now you can see, I can see through this page, which makes you think it's really thin, right? You feel like I could go in there and trace this image over if I want to draw it again, kind of using that under image. Maybe I want to shift the leg or whatever the case is, but that can be very handy. And I've done a lot of demos in here, test images. I've also done short comics in it. Let's see how much is filled up. A lot of it is filled up. So I've done some fast comics on it because who cares? It's a cheap sketchbook. And sometimes I'll even draw on both sides of the page, but not usually. As you can see, it can hold up to watercolor. This is something I've had for a few years, I'm sure, and I'll pick it up every now and then. Especially for demos and short comics. So you could get one of those and you could get something more serious. Don't get overloaded. Just try to play with something you've never touched before. Fabtriano this will be the final one. This is even cheaper. It's like a comic book itself. It has staples and really nice paper. I just realized I did my story of my cat's death in here. So this is really precious to me. And this will be something that I want to keep track of, and I'll reprint when it's time to do probably another collection of my short works. So you can do good work, you can do important work in a sketchbook. Here's an image where I probably spent more time on this panel than I did on any single page in that comic about my cat because I wanted to do it fast. That is a story of my sketchbooks. To summarize, we got Fabtriano. Strongly recommend. If you get it, be sure that you see what you're getting. They have white paper like this, and they have gridded paper. So don't accidentally get gridded if you want white. They have ones with dots, they have ones with grids. We've got Croquis, we've got Holbein. I recommend going to, if you're in my area, go to Janoff's at 111th, right next to the Seinfeld Diner. It's one of the few, supply stores that's still around in New York that's not part of one of the big chains. You probably will pay a few bucks more, but literally a few bucks. Don't get discounts as a teacher, but big picture, right? I will happily give them a couple extra bucks if independent art stores continuing. So that is my little video. I'm going to post this to the Mighty Network, and I'll see you all Thursday.